Hey, my name is Tom Laing, and I'm a real estate agent from the great state of Minnesota. Today, I'd like to go over foreclosures. Let's start with the definition of the word foreclosure. I looked up on Google and found a couple of different definitions, which is scary. The first one was a legal proceeding that bars or extinguishes a mortgager right of redeeming a mortgaged estate. That is a horrific definition. Dug a little bit deeper, found a better one. By the way, the fact that the internet has vastly differing definitions of a word that is a legal term tells you a lot about the internet. Here's what I found on a different website. Foreclosure, noun. The action of taking possession of a mortgaged property when the mortgagor fails to keep up their mortgage payments. That's better. All right, here's how I would define it. When a borrower defaults on a loan, it is the legal process of the lender taking back the possession of a property. So what happens in a foreclosure? It varies from state to state, but usually there's 6 phases of a foreclosure. All right, phase one. Phase one is the first missed payment. Usually the bank gives a 15-day grace period, but after that you get a missed payment notice. Usually it's a letter in the mail. After 2 missed payments, the lender will send a demand letter stating that the borrower has 30 days to catch up with the late payments or further action will be taken. The first phase is what's called pre-foreclosure by investors. All right, phase 2. This usually happens after 90 to 120 days of missed payments. At this point, the lender will send the borrower a notice of default. In some states, the lender will place this NOD on the front door of the house very prominently. Now, officially, the borrower is in pre-foreclosure. And now the loan is handed over to the pre-foreclosure department of that bank. At this point, the borrower is given another 90 days, and this is referred to as the reinstatement period. All right, then on to phase 3. Phase 3 begins when the loan has not been caught up within the 90 days after the NOD or notice of default. Then what happens is the lender records a notice of trustee at the county wherever the property is located. The lender must publish a notice in the local newspaper for 3 weeks indicating that the property will be available for public auction. Isn't that crazy? Something in the newspaper. How old school is that? The counties still do that. I'm sure it's not in every single state that they do that, but holy buckets. This notice that they put in the paper will have the owner's name and a brief and basic description of the property, as well as the date that the property will be sold. Now, at this point, it is legally known as the equitable redemption period, where the owner can still make the loan current. And the owner. Something else to note here in this phase is this is the last point where the owner can actually sell that property to be able to get out from under it, get the equity from it. The property is put up for sale at the county auction. And keep in mind, even after the property is sold at auction, the owners still have a period where they can get the house back. And this is called the statutory right of redemption. This time varies from state to state if the state has a right of redemption period. Okay, at this point, the highest bidder at the auction is given what's called a trustee's deed. So at this point, the purchaser is currently entitled to possession of the property contingent upon any redemption rights. Okay, now phase 5. Phase 5 is actually very interesting because if at auction there is no minimum bid made to get the property, what happens is it goes back to the bank and goes into a bank-owned property or what we call an REO, real estate owned. This happened a lot in 2008 and during the Great Recession, and it could possibly happen in the current economic climate. But anyways, the lender takes back the property and it becomes bank-owned or an REO property, and REO stands for real estate owned. That term to me really makes no sense. Isn't all real estate owned? Wait, I heard that there's some land in Antarctica that hasn't been claimed by anybody. Let's all move to Antarctica! I guess from the bank's perspective, real estate loan makes sense because banks are in the business of loaning money. They're not in the business of owning real estate. So if something does get defaulted on, someone does go into foreclosure and the bank acquires that asset, that's what the mortgage says. That's the point. If that does happen, I guess from the bank's perspective, it's real estate that they own. Okay, phase six. So if the property is still occupied, meaning there's still people living there, they get an eviction notice to leave immediately and to vacate the property. And then what happens is typically a sheriff comes and physically removes the occupants, and that's the end of phase six. So that usually that's a really sad day for a lot of people, but it doesn't always have to be this way. You have a ton of options. All right, option one that I can think of is to sell it yourself as long as you still have equity. Option two, you could sell it with a real estate agent. Option three, you could talk to the bank and try to restructure the loan. You know how professional athletes restructure their contract to put money on the end or money at the beginning or stuff like that. That's one of those situations where you possibly could restructure the loan, refinance it, but put the money back in. That's a whole topic for another video. The other thing is you could talk to a housing counselor, and they're the people that'll really guide you through each step. And they'll also, a good housing counselor will work with the bank or works for the bank to try to help get this paid off. Because, like I said before, banks are in the business of loaning money. They really don't want the real estate back, which I know sounds crazy, but they make the money off the interest. They make the money off you paying the mortgage payment. A huge chunk of mortgage payments, especially in the beginning, is interest. In fact, most of it's interest. That's the bank's money. They're getting their money in that way, and that's what banks do. They're in the business of loaning money. The other thing is, if you're getting really desperate, you could rent out the place, rent out a couple rooms, Airbnb it, VRBO it. I know a guy that rents out a tent in his backyard in summer. You could rent out your basement. You could rent out the garage. There is options there if you need extra cash to be able to pay for something. And hey, if anybody else has better options than what I just came up with, please put them in the comments below. I'd love to hear. Let's hear what everybody has to say about foreclosures and options to get out of it, and let me know. Again, my name is Tom Laing. I'm a real estate agent from the great state of Minnesota. Thanks and have a great day.